anybody care? This planet's empty, I see no signs of life. Please don't tell me that the human race did not survive. There are no people in the future. There are no people. There are no people in the future. No people at all. There are no people in the future. Where did all my people go? There are no people in the future. Let me try my people call. Where are all my people? Where are all my people? I guess I'll fly away now.
Hey, everybody. Welcome. It is Friday, October 27th, 2023. Welcome to Raging Chicken's Friday Politics Roundup. This is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. Each week we break down the good, the bad, and the ugly in state and national politics. You can help support this show by becoming a patron for as little as $5 a month. Head on over to patreon.com/rcpress. You can also help out the show by heading over to our YouTube channel if you're not there already. Smash that subscribe button, like the stream for this show, and hit that notification bell so you know every time that we go live. And if you're one of our awesome podcast listeners, make sure to leave us a 5-star review on whatever platform you listen on, and leave a comment to let other people, know why you like the show. Little things like this help other people find the show, support the work, highlight the amazing organizing and work that's happening in our communities. All the above. On today's show, UAW settled their contract with Ford this week. The gains in the contract are, can we use the word unprecedented? Maybe. That shows once again that organized, fearless worker organizing is what gets the goods. Yep, that's it. And House Republicans finally managed to elect a new Speaker of the House, introducing Mike Johnson, the anti-LGBTQ, election-denying, climate crisis-denying, right-wing Christian nationalist leader of the Republican-led House. Amazon announces near-record profits after 2 straight years of eliminating jobs and tightening worker surveillance. Also, in Amazon news, a new report shows that 4 in 10 Amazon workers report being injured on the job, and about 80% of workers feel the stare of Big Brother surveilling them at work. Coincidence? Jesus. Biden's strong support for the Israeli government, even during its indiscriminate ongoing bombing of civilians in Gaza, is hitting him in the polls. Indeed. It's going to be a complicated negotiation. Political one, that is. Also, amidst fears of a growing conflict in the region, the Biden administration approved the bombing of targets in Syria after drone and rocket attacks against American forces stationed in Iraq and Syria. Don't you get that feeling? To get that feeling that just one thing could go wrong here and... And another mass shooting rocks the country, this time in Lewiston, Maine. At least 18 people have been killed, and the killer remains on the loose. Absolutely devastating scenes right there. But if Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has anything to say about it, well, he thinks he's got the solution. What's the solution? Yep, make guns easier to purchase and institutionalize more people against their will. Yep, freedom rings, folks. Freedom rings. More local regional news, the Penridge School District passes an anti-trans policy in the name of protecting girls' sports. That provides a platform for Republican school board members to approve of the culture war the board is carrying out just before the November 7th election, as we expected, the big performance. But as we talked a little bit on the show on Monday, Penridge parent Darren Lawston won his lawsuit against Penridge School District. The judge ordered the district to hand over its book banning records. We'll see what we get from that. Parents and community members down in the Council Rock School District are getting a little nervous. Yep, it looks like Moms for Liberty is targeting their district to become the next Penridge and Central Bucks, bringing the extremist politics that they love so much down to Council Rock. And speaking of, fanning the flames of the culture war, Pennsylvania's Republican-led Senate passed legislation this week that would, institute a statewide book banning bill. Not so much. Or, I'm sorry, parental control bill, right? Absolutely crazy. Absolutely crazy. Now, of course, that has to get through right now. The Democrats control the House, which is, thank God. And now you also have Governor Shapiro in there. And yeah, I don't think he's said yet what he plans on doing, but sure as hell hope it's going to be to veto that legislation that ever got through the House. Crazy. Oh, God, there's so much more. But we're going to kind of try to focus on that this week. It's been pretty crazy. For more PA Progressive Talk, tune in to the Rick Smith Show's live stream at 9 p.m. Eastern. You can check him out on his YouTube channel, Twitter, Facebook, wherever you get your streams, and subscribe to his podcast wherever you get your podcast. Go to thericksmithshow.com for the latest across all his platforms. And you got to check out the Sisters of the Night Caucus podcast, the amazing PA women stirring the political cauldron behind the podcast Rock the House. And they know where the bodies are buried. Make sure to follow them on Twitter at The Night Caucus. That's at The Night Caucus on Twitter. And subscribe to their podcast on Anchor, Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcast. And you got to check it out. If you haven't heard already, The Signal is a new podcast from the Bucks County Beacon. It's actually, I'm going to have to start changing this a little bit for, I don't know if it's so much a new podcast anymore. It's becoming a feature, really. The Signal is a new podcast from the Bucks County Beacon. The Signal is hosted by the Beacon's editor-in-chief, Cyril Michaleko, and produced by yours truly. Twice a month, The Signal will shine a light on right-wing extremist currents streaming through Bucks County and beyond. Cyril invites guests who can provide insight, analysis, and organizing solutions so that we can steer the community toward calmer, saner, progressive routes. And you also got to check out The Civic Circle. The Civic Circle is their new Gen Z focused and hosted podcast. Yes, about once a month. You have the fabulous host of The Civic Circle bring yet another perspective to the growing body of work that is the Bucks County Beacon. You can check out all that stuff. Go to the buckscountybeacon.podbean.com for all the podcasts, or download them from wherever you get your podcast. Attention to all you gamers out there. The Game Inn, that's with two N's. The Game Inn is a Quakertown-based black family-owned gaming store. They're friends of the show, and they've got everything from retro N64s, the latest consoles, video games for all platforms, collectibles, action figures, Funko Pops, walls of Funko Pops. You got a question about a game, looking for something hard to get, they've got you covered. Check them out on their Facebook page and follow them on Twitter at The Game Inn. That's with two N's, at The Game Inn on Twitter. And, you can always shoot them an email at thegameinpa@gmail.com. Special shout out goes to Jonathan Mann, who wrote our intro song, There Are No People in the Future. Check out all his great stuff on his YouTube page and follow him on Twitter at Song of Day Man, two N's, at Song of Day Man on Twitter. Got a couple irons in the fire for this week's Out to Coop Live. I was hoping to have that sorted out before today's show, but I'll let you know probably later on today. Keep an eye on your socials. But look, everybody, if you want a progressive future, we need progressive media. Support Pull No Punches, homegrown progressive media today. Become a patron of Raging Chicken for as little as $5 a month. Head on over to patreon.com/rcpress. We're here for the fight, but we need you. Become a patron for the price of a good beer once a month. Help keep the media in the movement and the movement in the media. Become a patron for as little as $5 a month. I go to patreon.com/rcpress today. Well, happy, pre-Halloween weekend, everybody. Yes, spooky season is well upon us. I got to say, it's like, there was a few weeks ago, I was like, oh, yeah, Halloween's coming up. I'm so excited. Got some things to prepare, blah, blah, blah. Then all of a sudden, boom, it's here. And then now we're kind of scrambling. We're going to do some pumpkin carving this weekend. It just always gets busy. I mean, the beginning of the fall is always busy. It's got lots of birthdays. Like my birthday was last week. My son's was like, a few days before that, the week before that. So it's kind of one after the other. This is my, by the way, I'm going to show it off. This is for those of you who are on our YouTube channel. This is my gift from my daughter. It is a dragon mug. And I'll just spill the beans right now. I'm very excited that tomorrow, after a long hiatus that has been eating away at me, I'll be back DMing, right? Be little Dungeons and Dragons tomorrow, which I'm very excited about. The party is going into a festival in Fandolin. Kind of cool. Kind of cool. Anyways, that's, you don't care about that, right? But here we are. Anyways, lots going on in the news this week. I wanted to start with the UAW strike because it's one. I mean, it's amazing, right? We saw it now. I don't know how closely everybody's been following it. I mean, I know there's a lot going on, but on Wednesday night, UAW President Shawn Fain and Vice President Chuck Browning basically announced that they had reached a deal with Ford, right? And they called it the most lucrative agreement per member in several decades. And Fain called it a historic agreement. And in many ways, it's true. This is from the article in These Times. It said, quote, "We won things nobody thought possible," Fain said in a video message. Quote, "Since the strike began, Ford put 50% more on the table than when we walked out. This agreement sets us on a new path to make things right at Ford and the big three across the auto industry. Together, we are turning the tide for the working class in this country." Right? And this is really true, right? I mean, this is like one of the reasons why this is so important is because, this is like, direct action gets the goods, right? Organized workers, union organizing, that's what gets the goods, right? I've always had this, I wrote this article once, right? And it's to try to explain this once. I actually presented it at a conference. It was called Holding Back the Membership, right? And it just kind of like, and again, believe me, this is nothing new. This is something that unions and organized working class folks have talked about for like centuries, right? Or at least a century, right? I mean, the very least. But the whole idea, right? And this is true not just in union organizing, but across the ways, right? Is that it's about leadership, right? I mean, leadership. It's about, or I should say, it's about a concept of leadership, right? Is that we have this we've long been imprisoned, that is imprisoned in kind of our minds in the in labor organizing and union movements, that this business unionism idea, right? That we elect a leader, right? The president of our union or whatever union we're talking about, and then after the leader is elected, we go back to work. Right. And then we leave it up to the experts, right? We leave it up to the leaders, right, to do what's best for us. Right. And it's a really destructive model of working class organization, right? An organization more broadly. Right. That model works very well if you want to privilege the people at the top. Right. And basically, but you're going to consult with the members periodically along the lines to rubber stamp whatever election you're going to do, right? And what it leads to the same thing that we see in all of our other politics too as well. It leads to like this separation between the membership, right, and the leaders, because the members aren't really asked to do anything. The members aren't organized. The leaders don't attempt to actually put resources into organizing. Instead, they kind of like trot out their skills, right? Their persuasive skills at the bargaining table or with the bosses, right? And that's, it's like, it's the backroom deal model. It's the idea that they're going to just get good things for the members, and the members are going to be fine with allowing them to keep their leadership positions, allowing them to kind of make the deals for them, as long as the members get decent raises. Right, as long as the members get the benefits, right? And it's just a really messed up way of thinking about worker empowerment, right? It's one that just says the purpose of a union is to elect leaders to try to get the best deal they can, monetary deal, kind of like material deal for workers themselves, workers in their contract for their company or for that particular workplace. As opposed to, the history of the labor movement, which has not been, only kind of, make sure that the workers in in this particular workplace get theirs, but rather a way of empowering working class peoples more broadly. It's about democracy, right? And it's about where power comes from, right? Because what happened, what we saw with the UAW, and this is true for, right across industries, right across unions, is that while times were good and the bosses, right, the owners, or were kind of willing to share, right, through their own good graces and lots of federal legislation and lots of goodwill and things like this. As long as they were willing to share, some of the profits of the company, right, and give workers a decent cut, and the only reason why they got the decent cut to begin with is because they organized unions, just to be clear, right? I mean, look, so as long as they, there was some correspondence with that of, okay, if the company does good, the worker's going to do good, right? If the company does better, the worker's going to do better, right? There's going to be some kind of like idea about sharing. That was that kind of compact, right? This kind of mythical compact of the 1950s and 60s, right? And of course, it's a myth, right? I mean, it wasn't this all rosy good. It was good in a few industries, right? Good work for a while there. We've got the icons of the labor movement, these kind of union leaders that stand out, and there's stories about them and all that kind of stuff. But really, it was the rank and file organizing. It was workers on the ground standing together, building their movements is where the power came from. And we always do this in this country, and I'm sure it's not just this country, but we flip around like the order of operations, right? We mess up the order of operations, right? It's like we see there's leaders of these unions, right? And the unions having good contracts, and then we attribute the good contracts to those leaders, right? It's like this kind of like historical forgetfulness, right? It's like the leaders did not create the power of the movement, the workers did. Right? And that doesn't mean the leaders are insignificant. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying it was the power of people standing together. Right? If Walter Reuther, right, in the famous sit-downs, like if Walter Reuther by himself went in and sat down in a plant, nothing will happen. It was only the willingness of workers to organize together to take over the plants and do this famous sit-down strikes that got the UAW their contracts. Same is true of the miners. Same is true of, the justice for janitors. Same thing. I mean, you can go industry by industry, but teachers, right? It's the organizing of the members is the source of the power. But everything in our society is set up to convince us to forget that, right? That it's organized power, it's organized people, right? That is the source of the power. So the idea, this holding back the membership idea, right, was like when a leader goes to a bargaining table, right? When a leader goes to the boss at a particular work site, right? And this, we could extend this into politics and stuff like this, right? There's that model of leadership, the model of kind of power, of like leader power, where it's about how smart and kind of like how smart and persuasive that union leader is, right? Right? How so has the ability to kind of like run circles around the management with the facts and show them how they're wrong and expose their hypocrisies, right? And they might even, those kind of leaders might even then go to the membership and tell them stories of how they, expose the hypocrisy of the members and make the members laugh at how silly the bosses are, right? How ridiculous they are, right? And there's a certain kind of catharsis in that, right? But ultimately, it'd be about the kind of, and then, the leaders would go back to their closed room meetings, right? And the members are not kind of, are not part of the old process and negotiations process and not part of the organizing process, right? They're just told to sit tight and wait, right? And then when the leaders decide that that's the best deal that they can get, excuse me, then they come out to the members and they try to convince the members that this is the best that they can get. Even when the members are like, this is not a good deal, but they're like, this is the best we could do is, blah, 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 blah. Until the members start to feel like, okay, well, I guess we got to take this. And what that's meant for decades has been concessions and concessions and concessions and concessions, right? Because ultimately, those leaders at the table did not have power. Their persuasive skills was only as good as they had the goodwill of, the bosses. But when have people in power ever, right, had the best interest of everybody, like, you know, in their minds. Never. Ultimately, they just want more for themselves. They want more control. They want more power. They want more money. They want more profit. You know, all that kind of stuff. They see themselves as the demigods on this plane, right? I mean, that's where they are. But they somehow, like union leaders, political leaders, whatever it might be, right, convince themselves that they alone, right? It's a freaking Trumpian nonsense. They alone have the skills, right? They alone have this kind of thing. And they don't put energy into organizing. They don't put energy into like building up member power. They put energy into things that they can control, like public relations, like press releases, right? Graphics, right? Good messaging, right? And again, I'm being, you know, a little bit more cutting here than needs be, because those things are important, right? I'm not saying they're not important, but they think that that's the end all be all, things that they can control, right? And then they can message to the public and they can message to their members, right? But what it's led to is concession to concession. We've seen this kind of like, you know, there's the gutting out of kind of organized labor, right? And some of that has to do with, you know, what's happened in terms of global agreements, which I would argue is also a function of the lack of investment in organizing worker power, right? But that's been true at the UAW. I mean, the UAW has been on a decline for like decades, right? They have, let me see if I can find this one statistic. Oh, I wish I had it. I thought I had the one article up that does it. But I'll give you one. Let me see. Where is this here? Just to give you an idea. Okay. So here's one of the things that they won in the Ford contract, right? UAW won in the Ford contract is a 25% general wage increase over the 4.5-year life of the contract. A 25% wage increase. Now, if you remember, they were asking for 40, right? Because they're smart going in. 40 would be what they deserve, right? But, you know, if you're a union organizer or you're a union leader and you're a negotiator, you know that, look, you're going to say what you deserve and you're going to get as close as you possibly can to that. But ultimately, in contract negotiations, there's negotiations. But why does that matter? 25% general wage increase over the 4.5-year life. So in comparison, the union secured 23% in total wage increases in the 21 years between 2001 and 2022. Right? So in other words, for 21 years, there was a 23% increase, like a percentage a year in wages. Meanwhile, profits rocketed. Like, this is why Sean Fain and the others were basically saying that we deserve a 40% increase in our pay. Why? Because that's what management has got. That's what the owners have got. That's what they have extracted from our work. But the company did the same thing that companies always do, or managers always do, bosses always do. They say, we don't have any money. There's nothing we can do, right? Do you want us to go out of business? Right? I just the fact that they're just making money hand over fist and putting it in their own pockets belies like the words coming out of their mouth. Right? I mean, it just basically says that they're lying. They're messaging right back. They're using the message of despair, the message of Tina. There is no alternative. The message of, oh, it's not our fault. It's some sort of force of nature. And then for decades, like I said, the union leaders, because they had not invested in the organized members, said, oh, okay, that's the best we're going to do. We're going to get something. By contrast, the whole idea about holding back the membership is like, I had this image in my head. Is like, if you're at the bargaining table or any kind of negotiation, right? You think about where the real power comes. If you believe that power emanates from an organized workforce or organized community, whatever we're going to talk about, organized from the people, right? Then a leader steps forward and they kind of got their arms, you can't really see it in the thing, but you got like hundreds or thousands of people behind you, right? With your kind of arms outstretched, kind of like holding them back, right? And those members are organized. They're ready to strike. They're ready to go. They're pissed off, right? And the leader basically gives the bosses an alternative, right? Or, ultimatum, if you will. But he gives you, here's your choices, right? You can negotiate reasonably based upon facts, based upon real statistics, not your kind of messaging, your pretense about, being poor or, being in crisis. Or I can lift up my arms and let these folks at you. Right? In other words, let them strike. Right? We can do this like reasonable human beings, like what this is supposed to be in a contract negotiation, or we can shut everything down. As Rick Smith has always said, the most powerful tool in a workers have, right, is to stick their hands in their pockets and do nothing. Right? Is because we are the ones who create the wealth. We are the ones who create the product, the service, whatever you want to be. The same is true we see with the SAG-AFTRA strikes, right? It's like the managers, the owners of the studios are not the ones that create the content. They're not the ones who do the filming, the set building. They're not the ones who do the writing. They're not the ones who do the acting. They're just the ones who extract it. Right? So anyways, that's that whole idea. And then what the UAW did here is they did the holding back the membership. They spent, new leadership came in and basically said, enough of this behind backroom deals where we're just basically telling the members to kind of hope for the best. We're going to invest in organizing, and we're going to put more responsibility on kind of on local committees to basically to help their organizing and to generate kind of creative ideas and to give them a little bit more autonomy over how they do that, right? And all the while basically saying we're going to get a good contract, but the only way you get a good contract is to organize and be prepared to strike, right? It's the inoculation move, right? Is that the way that you kind of prevent all, because look, striking is not easy. Right? I mean, there's real consequences, right? You stop getting paid and things like this, right? So people are generally going to have a lot of fears. They're worried about losing their job. They're worried about a whole bunch of other stuff. The only way you do that, the only way you combat that is that you prepare, right? That's why UAW does the test picketing, right? Get people out and see what it's like. Because that's not part of our normal routine. So it gets us out of our little comfort zone a little bit, right? And then they start doing it, and they start to exercise their own power and kind of to organize their own protests. And that's what they did. And they practiced the picketing. They had organized. They had mobilized. And then Sean Fain made good on his words. Right? He said, this is what we're going to do, and here's a deadline. When the deadline come, they struck. Right? It's not a fake deadline. It's not an idle threat. It's not about rattling swords. Right? It's about saying, okay, here's a deadline, and we're going to show you that we're going to stick to it. And again, there was a lot of talk about, well, is their strategy going to be useful this year or this time around, right? Because remember when they went on strike, they didn't just strike the entire industry. I said, okay, we're going to start low. We're going to pick one from each of the big three that we're negotiating with. First of all, we're not going to negotiate. We're going to negotiate all at once. We're going to negotiate with everybody at the same time. We're all in the same thing, right? And they're going to pit them all against one another. And we're going to pick this plant from you, this plant from you, and then this plant from you. And that's how our strike is going to begin. And boom, they called for it. Workers put down their tools, walked off the job, and went on strike on those plants. Everyone else continued to work. And at first there's some questions, well, is this him just playing games or whatever? Nope. How do we know he wasn't just playing games? Well, because a week later, right, comes up, or a couple weeks later, however it was, they're saying, oh, well, guess what? They're still not doing anything. They're still not bargaining in good faith. So here's some more plants that are going to walk off the job. Stand up and strike. Stand up and strike. And then more and more. And now we're at the point where these big three automakers were still not negotiating good faith. Right? So they said, okay, now we're going to make it really hurt because you people still don't get it. So now we're going after the most profitable, the biggest and most profitable plants are all the three. And Ford was like, oh, no, we're done. That's it. Nope. We don't want you to shut down our biggest like F-150 factory in the country. Nope, because that's our biggest moneymaker. And they came to an agreement. So here's what came out of this agreement with Ford. I already mentioned the 25% general wage increase over the contract. Restoration of the cost of living adjustment, which ties wage increases to inflation, right? Here you go. It was suspended in 2009 amid the bankruptcies at GM and Chrysler, right? So if you remember, the federal government stepped in there. This is kind of what you need to remember about, Obama. Obama, the one who kind of basically said that, when workers are going to strike, he's going to put on a comfortable pair of shoes and join them on the strike line. He never did. Biden did. Obama never did that. And then when they were doing the bailouts, right? They bailed out the auto industry, if you recall, right? In the wake of the financial collapse in 2008. And then part of one of the conditions of that was that there was also going to be some austerity measures imposed upon workers with no end cap. And one of them was basically, going to take away this the COLA increases, which basically says as inflation goes up, you're going to hit those, you're going to have your wages go up, right, just to beat inflation. That's been reinstated now in this contract. Also, the elimination of wage tiers at Ford's Sterling, Axle, and Rawsonville plants in Michigan, with lower tier workers at these facilities seeing an immediate, check this out, the lower tier workers at those facilities are going to see an immediate 85% raise upon the contract's negotiation or ratification. Right? Because there was a contract in place that said, okay, here's these workers that have been around for a while, right? They're going to be up on this tier, right? They're going to get paid more. But new workers that are coming, we're going to have them at a lower rate. They're going to get paid less. They're going to have fewer benefits, right? And so we're going to have a two-tier workforce, right? And this is happening across all industries. Nope, they got rid of that, and then 85% raise to bring those lower tier workers up to the standard. 85. Can you imagine being one of those workers right now, and you're going to get an 85% raise? Unbelievable. A reduction in the amount of time new hires must wait to reach a maximum wage levels. They're going to move it from 8 years to 3 years. And that's what it was before the major union concessions in 2007, before the financial collapse. You can't blame that one on the financial collapse. That one was because of union concessions and a lack of investment in organizing. So they organize. Here you go. Okay, we gave that concession. No, we're going to claw it back. Right? We're going back to the way things used to be. 3 years, and then you hit your norm. 150% wage increase for temp workers over the life of the contract. 150% wage increase for temp workers over the life of the contract. And approximately 68% increase to the starting wage and roughly 33% increase to the top wage. All Ford workers will see an immediate 11% increase on ratification. Browning, the VP, said that was, quote, almost equal to all of the wage increases since 2007 combined. An increased retirement benefits for workers with pensions and to workers with 401ks. And for the first time, the right to strike over plant closures, a key UAW demand to help protect auto workers' jobs. This is awesome. Now let's be clear. These are just the details that were released, that were talked about in the Wednesday announcement. These are not the full details of the contract. Right. So as always is important to do is, like, as amazing as all this sounds, you wait for the details to come out when the members are going to vote on the actual text, and we're going to find out more about this contract, find out where there were trade-offs, if there were, and to what extent are there. One of the things that was won in one of the other cases, I want to say with GM, was a commitment that their battery plants, because you remember we talked about this on the show several weeks ago, the battery plants, which are going to be absolutely critical in the switch over to electric vehicles, right? We're in these kind of like, these partnership agreements with other companies. And so therefore we're considered outside of the UAW contract, right? So therefore those workers could get paid like crap. UAW said, no, we want them in. We want those people to be part of the contract, not outside of it. And they'll be get the same that other UAW members are going to be. And the GM case, they got that. We'll see what happens with Ford and other stuff too, but it's good. I mean, just this is amazing. As they're writing in these times, illustrating how the innovative tactic of simultaneously striking at all three automakers pits the companies against each other. The pressure is now on GM and Stellantis to also reach a deal as Ford strikers will return to work. Right? Because basically they're saying now, like, okay, now Ford is going to be back up to production. Ford is going to be able to get its vehicles out there. And GM and Stellantis is now they're in a competitive chase, right? Because they're like, crap, if we don't settle soon, we're not producing our cars, and Ford's going to run away with a larger the profit share this year. Pretty amazing. So anyways, I wanted to, spend a little time on that because, I think it's been so incredibly instructive, right? About what real organized power looks like, right? Now we're going to see what's going to happen. I've been, one of the things I've been working on getting somebody from SAG-AFTRA on, because I want to, hear more about what's happening in that strike and where things are, right, from the Writers Guild and SAG-AFTRA to talk about that because, in some ways, those workers, right, in SAG-AFTRA, right, the writers and the set designer, all that kind of stuff, they're in a more precarious situation than some of the UAW workers, right? And like in a sense, a lot of their work is really piecemeal. You have huge discrepancies in kind of the membership from, people like, whatever, George Clooney, kind of way at the top, or Scarlett Johansson, way at the top, to your bit actors, right? Or your kind of background actors or your commercial actors, right? Who are just trying to, make a living, right? Just get by from week to week. George Clooney actually had, this is kind of a side point, had an interesting suggestion on that part. So basically, in the SAG-AFTRA contract, there's a cap on union contributions, right? So it's like this. What the Democrats always do. They do this really messed up crap. So what happened with Social Security? Same kind of deal. They say that okay, everybody pays whatever, let's say 1%, 1.5% of their paycheck for dues, right? Even 3%, whatever it might be, right? It depends on your union. So let's just say it's like a 2%. We'll just take the middle. It's like 2% union dues, right? So that comes out of your contract. So if if I get a paycheck that's for like $1,000, right? I mean, 2% is not very much, right? It's down here. But the more money you make, right, the larger that actual real dollar amount is, right? So instead of being like, $20, it's going to be $200 or $2,000, right? And there's a cap on like, at what point does that stop increasing, right? So you get up to like whatever, I don't even know I can't remember what it is. It's like, say if you get up to like, okay, like $100,000, right? Because you're making, I don't know, like truckloads full of money, right? You're one of the star actors. And you get up to $100,000 and they cap it at that. Say, okay, no more increase. You get to keep all the rest of it. And George Clooney, it's not just George Clooney. I want to say, I don't think it's Scarlett Johansson. I think it's killing me. But, basically have come up and basically said, let's take the cap off, right? To make sure that we can sustain the strike. Let's take the cap off, right? And Clooney's basically saying, look, I'm making whatever, hundreds of millions of dollars a year, right? It's not going to hurt me to pay more dues. As a matter of fact, we should do more to protect the industry. We should pay more because we've been the beneficiaries of this system. So we should make sure the people coming up are taken care of, right? It's kind of a cool move. Anyways, that's a little bit outside of the range where we're going to talk today. The other thing I want to talk about a little bit today is the, our election denying new Speaker of the House. As we know, it's been an absolute circus in the Republican-dominated and led House of Representatives. They've been unable to elect a new speaker after they, ousted a speaker, their own speaker, because they didn't like him anymore. Because they upset him too much and he wasn't extreme enough, like for the far right, the Freedom Caucus, and even the MAGA extreme Freedom Caucus people, right? So, they went through their list, right? They got rid of Kevin McCarthy, and then, we saw the whole drama with Jim Jordan. They're kind of like, hey, they voted to put forward, a guy who protected sex offenders, but, nope, he couldn't get elected. And one after the other, this has been bopping around. Mike Johnson was put forward, and most people, right, who pay pay cursory attention to politics, don't know who Mike Johnson is, right? He's relatively obscure. He's from Louisiana. He is in the GOP Republican leadership, but he just kind of keeps a little bit of a low profile. Well, he got their support, and he actually won a vote, right? He basically got enough support of Republicans to get him elected. The Guardian did a great piece about who this guy is, because one of the things he's known for mostly is that he was one of the people that was helping craft a strategy for election denial, right? So Johnson, we all know everyone's going to support what Trump says, but Johnson was kind of even more involved than a lot of other people. So he not only did this is from the Guardian, did he voice support for Trump's conspiracy theory that voting machines are rigged. Later, he was one of 147 Republicans to object to results in key states, even after a pro-Trump mob attacked Congress on January 6, right? Johnson also authored an amicus brief to the Supreme Court in a case in which Texas sought to have swing state results thrown out. According to the New York Times, House Republican lawyers said Johnson's brief was unconstitutional. Nevertheless, he persuaded 125 colleagues to sign it, using some tactics that others thought heavy-handed. Another thing, he was a spokesperson for a hate group, according to the Southern Poverty Law Center. Johnson worked for the Alliance Defending Freedom, which was designated by the Southern Poverty Law Center as a U.S. extremist group. According to the SPLC, the ADF has, quote, supported the recriminalization of sexual acts between consenting LGBTQ plus adults in the United States and criminalization abroad, defended state-sanctioned sterilization of trans people abroad, contended that LGBTQ plus people are more likely to engage in pedophilia, and claimed that homosexual agenda will destroy Christianity and society. This is the guy who he worked for. The Alliance, this is the organization that Mike Johnson worked for, Alliance Defending Freedom. That was before he entered politics. He opposes LGBTQ rights, as it should be kind of clear from that. Again, from The Guardian, in state politics and at the national level, Johnson has worked to claw back gains made by LGBTQ plus Americans in their fight for equality. In 2016, as he ran for Congress, he told the Louisiana Baptist Message that he had, quote, been out on the front lines of the culture war, defending religious freedom, the sanctity of human life, and biblical values, including the defense of traditional marriage and other ideals like these when they've been under assault. He has since led, and this is unquote, he has since led efforts by the National Don't Say Gay bill regarding the teaching of LGBTQ issues in schools, and is also opposed to gender affirming care in children. Another one, he's stringently anti-abortion. He has maintained, he has co-sponsored bills basically for a nationwide abortion ban. Right? He wants to cut Social Security and Medicare. Right? His cuts are widely kind of regarded as something you can't do. Johnson is one of the ones who is actively wanting to cut those programs. He is an advocate for so-called covenant marriage. Right? In other words, once you're married, there is no getting out of it. So this is again from The Guardian. When he married his wife Kelly in 1999, the couple agreed to a covenant marriage, a conservative Christian idea that makes it harder to divorce. The Johnsons promoted the idea on ABC's Good Morning America. He is also a climate skeptic. In 2017, Johnson told voters in his oil-rich home state, quote, the climate is changing, but the question is it being caused by natural cycles over the span of Earth's history, or is it changing because we drive SUVs? I don't believe in the latter. I don't think that's the primary driver. He's been called an energy champion by the American Energy Alliance, which is a right-wing group that has defended fossil fuel use. Right? And the list go on. Right? I thought I'd play you just one bit of sound here. This is from his appearance on Fox News. Right? And he was basically being interviewed. This is a glowing promo video basically for Fox News, get Johnson on there and to kind of humanize him and to kind of make him seem like a reasonable human being. So this is what he told Fox News about when he's asked by people about what his views are. And this is pretty much straightforward. Here we go.
Someone asked me today in the media, they said, it's curious, people are curious, what does Mike Johnson think about any issue under the sun? I said, well, go pick up a Bible off your shelf and read it. That's my worldview. That's what I believe. And so someone.
There you go, right? That's my worldview. That's what I bring to legislation, right? And let's be clear, it's not just the Bible on the shelf, right? It's the specific kind of Bible. There's been multiple articles that have been coming out kind of pointing to the language that he uses is consistent with Christian nationalist language, right? So that's the guy, right? That's the guy right there. So, if you thought things were going to get better with just kind of like, oh, we're going to replace the leader, maybe, let's hope, right? Because everybody wants to hope. Everybody wants to hope so bad. We want to hope so bad that, maybe the next guy's going to be more reasonable, but he's not. They just get more extreme. Crazy. I thought, okay, so what else we got? So Amazon, talked about a little bit about Amazon, but so here, this is from CNBC. In topping an analyst estimates for its third quarter results on Thursday, Amazon reported an operating margin of 7.8%. That's like the highest profit percentage, basically. That's the highest since it reached its record of 8.2% in early 2021. Why is that significant? Early 2021, you remember early 2021? That's at the height of the pandemic, when everybody was relying upon a kind of home delivery to basically get basic staples, right? And Amazon, again, instead of making sure its workers were taken care of, nope, it reaped record profits, right, in 2021. So this is like the second high since then, right? And how do they do that? Well, after Jeff Bezos kind of like stepped away from kind of like, helming the company to focus more on his space travels, Andy Jassy is now the new CEO. And this is kind of what he does. This is from CNBC. So Jassy, who took to the helm in mid-2021, has been laser focused on trimming costs across the company for over a year, eliminating 27,000 jobs since last fall, axing some riskier bets, and reshaping Amazon's fulfillment network to emphasize speed and efficiency. Suddenly, Amazon is a profit machine, right? Of course, you have fewer workers doing more. Yep. In its third quarter earnings report on Thursday, Amazon reported an operating margin of 7.8%, the highest since it reached record 8.2%, like I said. The company's operating margin, which is the profit left after subtracting all the costs to operate the business, was 2% a year ago and has historically hovered in single digits, and Bezos was often perfectly happy with running a negative margin on occasion, right? That just gives you a sense of kind of where things are at. So you have that on the one hand, right? We saw all the stories about Amazon drivers having to pee in bottles, right, to be able to stay on task. We see increasing like stresses on Amazon. So also this week, this new report gets put out by an organization. Let me just get the name of the organization. A new report by the Center for Urban and Economic Development. And it's called Pain Points, Data on Work Intensity, Monitoring, and Health at Amazon Warehouses, right? Here's some of the key findings of this report. The key findings are 41% of workers report being injured while working at an Amazon warehouse. 51% at the company for more than 3 years have been injured, right? So for example, if you've been there for more than 3 years, the rate of injury is higher, right? 41% of workers report being injured at work. 69% have had to take unpaid time off due to pain or exhaustion from the working at the company in the past month. 34% have had to do so three or more times. 69% have had to take unpaid time off because the intensity of work is so much. 52% feel burned out from their work at Amazon. And among those working at the company more than 3 years, 60% report feeling burned out. 41% always or most of the time feel a sense of pressure to work faster. And another 30% said they sometimes do. Injury, 53%, and burnout, 78% are elevated among those feeling pressure to work faster. 60% experience more workplace monitoring at Amazon than at previous jobs. 9% experience less monitoring, and 17% say the level's about the same. 60% say they feel there's more monitoring. So what's the relationship here? You basically cut jobs, you tell people to work faster, you surveil them, you keep them kind of like consciously in states of stress, and you reap more profits, and you do it off the backs of your workers. You cut jobs, you make conditions worse, more people are going to get hurt. The Center for Urban Economic Development, who produced this report, is from they're based out of the University of Illinois in Chicago. They do this. This is kind of what they do, right? Just gives you a sense of kind of like, this is where the profit comes from, right? And Amazon's going to get celebrated in the media. They go, oh, look at all this. Look how much Amazon's making so much money. Always remember, their money is in direct relationship to the conditions at work, right? Especially those big organizations. Crazy. We've seen, I decided, there's enough reporting going on right now about what's happening in Israel and Gaza. It's devastating. I talked about this, I think, on the show last week pretty extensively. It's like, it just wrecks me every day looking at this, because you see there's nothing good here. I've also said on the show that I don't feel great about the way that the conversation is happening. Let me be more blunt. I think some of the kind of reactive politics or reactionary politics on the left are problematic too. I will never walk away from the fact that basically Palestinians have been subjected to an apartheid regime for generations now. That it is as I agree 100% with what the UN shows, the World Health Organization called the world's largest open air prison in Gaza. The conditions among Palestinians are horrific. Now, does that? Yeah, the UN Secretary, Secretary General of the UN, excuse me, was criticized this week and calls for him to resign because he had the gall to acknowledge that the recent attack, the Hamas attack, and all this kind of stuff that lit up that existed in a context, right? And that if we're going to solve this, we got to deal with the whole context. He was very, very explicit about saying that just because there's a context, just because there's an apartheid regime, just because that is not permission for Hamas to slaughter 1,400 Israelis. That kind of no, it's not. It's not even an explanation for it, right? But we also know that oppression breeds extremism. So the solution is not going to be more repression, more destruction, more devastation. But that's precisely what we see the Israeli government doing right now. I mean, the New York Times just released these comparisons, right? There's new satellite data. It was like the before and after the bombings. It's just like huge sections of cities just gone. And that's not just in the area that Israel basically forcibly displaced all these Palestinian families who lived up there. Over 1 million people fleeing their homes so they won't get killed. It was also in the south, also along the coast. And I look at it, I said I wasn't going to talk so much about it, but yeah, I just look at it and I'm just like, this is start taking sides in this thing, and then this is I don't know, and maybe I don't know, maybe I don't want to use this as a cop out or something like that, but maybe just me, like me getting old or whatever, I don't know. But sharpening the conflict is not going to be a solution right now, I don't think. This is where like humanity at its forefront, right? Being like human first over governments is the only way out. What Naomi Klein said in the, I read, what, a week and a half ago or whatever it was, I read her piece in the Guardian, where it basically says, side with the children over the guns always. And now, and so you see these, you see protesters who are basically protesting on college campuses and different communities that are kind of in support of Palestinians, right? Basically saying, stop the bombing. We need a ceasefire here. Stop the destruction. Stop the killing of Palestinians, right? Yes. Okay. Yes. Right. But it's like we got to have, I mean, I don't know, how do you have that? How do you basically frame that other than saying we have to just stop the freaking killing? We've got to, we got to go right at the freaking hate and the roots of it. I mean, again, I don't think there's any easy solution there. I mean, there were and this is going to make things worse, right? So when you have a whole bunch of videos started emerging, right, of, at least as this is what they say they are, right? I think it was like the Daily Beast had a story on this where you had Israelis posting mocking videos of Palestinians to TikTok, right, where they would blacken out their teeth and dress up like kind of like poor Palestinians, dumb Palestinians, and all that kind of stuff, mocking them as these bombings are going on, right, and sometimes with their kids, right? I mean, that's like wildfire. It's just like, that's not justified, nor is extremism from Palestinians. It's certainly not the wanton slaughter of civilians that Hamas carried out. And now you're seeing people, like some Israeli-backed organizations pulling out like funds from universities, right, and then calls to kind of like suppress the students, and I mean, this is really, really effed up stuff. And there's an article that just was recently out too as well. Let me see if I can pull this one up. I know I have it right here. This is from the New York Times today too as well. The Democrats splinter over Israel as young, diverse left rages at Biden. Now, of course, the New York Times has got it, and the editorial folks there got their own little agendas. But this is kind of what the lead is in the article, and the political implications for Biden is not like the most important part about this story, but nonetheless, you see the impact. So here's what the Times says: the Democratic Party's years-long unity behind behind President Biden is beginning to erode over his steadfast support of Israel and its escalating war with the Palestinians, with a left-leaning coalition of young voters and people of color showing more discontent toward him than at any point since he was first elected. From Capitol Hill to Hollywood, in labor unions and liberal activist groups, and on college campuses and high school cafeterias, a raw emotional divide over the conflict is convulsing liberal America. While moderate Democrats and critics on the right have applauded Mr. Biden's backing of Israel, he faces new resistance from an emerging faction of his party that views the Palestinian cause as an extension of the racial and social justice movements that dominated American politics in the summer of 2020. In protest, open letters, and staff revolts and walkouts, liberal Democrats are demanding that Mr. Biden break with decades-long American policy and calls for a ceasefire. Right? The political power of the Israeli skeptics within the party is untested. With more than a year remaining until the 2024 presidential election, their effort has been fractious and disorganized, and they have little agreement over how much blame to lay at Mr. Biden's feet or whether to punish him next November if he ignores these pleas. And yet, Mr. Biden is already struggling with low Democratic enthusiasm, and it would not take much of a slip in support from voters who backed him in 20. So you can see how the narrative is being set up. But nonetheless, it's true. That divide exists, right? But even in here, again, some of this is, I have to say, I think the reporting here is pretty decent. But it's always important to make clear that in many of these protests, right, I'm not going to say all of them, but in many of these protests, right, they are not anti-Israeli, even as they show opposition to the Israeli government, right? And you got, there's this test. Patricia Roberts Miller wrote that book, Demagoguery and Democracy. We had her on the show and we talked about this, right? One of the rules when you kind of want to prevent demagoguery is that you want to absolutely make sure that there's, say, reciprocity in argumentation. So, for example, we saw Israeli government officials come out and equate the Palestinian people and call them all animals. We're dealing with animals. And basically hold them responsible. Because years ago, people in Gaza voted for Hamas. Then Hamas got rid of elections. And that Hamas is, by all accounts, has also been oppressing people in Gaza too as well, because they are the ones with the weapons, right? They become more and more dictatorial within the Gaza Strip, right? So the Israeli official says, well, everyone is responsible because they didn't oust them. They didn't rise up and get rid of Hamas. So therefore, everybody, women, children, everyone are somehow responsible and therefore justifies the bombing. And with absolutely correctly, people came out and were in direct opposition to that. And we know that framework is the framework of war crimes. Right? You use it's called collective punishment, right? That you punish civilians, everybody. Right? You hold everybody of a people accountable for maybe even if the unthinkable acts like Hamas did of say either people in leadership or people from that country. That's a war crime. Just like when Timothy McVeigh, right? If you ever read, what that dude was thinking, Timothy McVeigh, when he went and he committed the Oklahoma City bombing and killed all those people there and those kids. His justification, right, was that the people who worked in that building, it was a federal office building, right, were working for the government. And doesn't matter if they were a secretary or a custodian or a what do you call it? Like a teacher, daycare teacher, preschool teacher, didn't matter. Because by taking that paycheck and supporting it, they are supporting the government, which he was anti-government. So he was holding all those people accountable for what he saw as the crimes of the federal government. That's collective punishment. That's why we call it terrorism. That's why we call it a war crime when it's committed against other nations. So people are right to come out and call that. But then we've got to also then make sure the flip side, right, is true. That we've got to be careful then about our language when we talk about Israel. Right? We've got to remember that there were millions of people in the streets of Israel rising up against the opposition against Netanyahu. Right? And I know we can get into the polls about what people say and all that kind of stuff. But to say that everyone in Israel, everyone that is kind of wants a Jewish homeland, is the same thing as the extremist Israeli government is also about collective identification and potentially collective punishment. And that's what gets us to the anti-Semitism, which is the reason, and it is a self-justifying thing. And this, again, Naomi Klein pointed, it's like, this is what the Zionists will make use of because of that long history of anti-Semitism, because of the Holocaust. When Germany and Austria, the Nazis were willing to carry out exterminationist policies. Right? This is not in their heads. It actually happened. We look at the pogroms of in Russia. If you look at the long, centuries of history of repression of Jewish people, you know this. So you can't just kind of oh, well, look, all of them think this thing. No. And I get, watching these debates, watching these protests kind of unfold, it just gets really disconcerting to see it go in a potentially really bad way. Because that will only feed the extremism. It will only feed the conflict. But then people will die. Anyways, so much for not talking about that today. God. Yeah, let's switch over to little things that is kind of going on a little bit closer to home here. What did I do with my... okay, let's bring it back up. So I do want to talk about, as to kind of close out for today, we had the mass shooting in Maine, which we know we're going through these same things. Then we have Governor Ron DeSantis coming out and basically saying, yeah, we just need to make sure people have more guns, and then we're just going to institutionalize more people that against their will if their family thinks that they should be because of mental illness. And there's all sorts of problems with that. But it's devastating what happened in Maine. Here, I'm not going to go too much into that today, but again, the news is flooded with it here. But I feel for him. So, in this week, just news in kind of our own backyards. Once again, we have the Penridge School District passed their anti-trans policy in the name of protecting girls' sports. And here we go. So that was the big thing on the agenda, that they were going to pass this. There was going to be nobody who was going to stand in opposition with it. Even the so-called moderates on the board pretty much voted for it. So, those folks who want to elevate Joan Cullen or, other members of that board kind of nope, they all voted for it pretty much. I think maybe one or two people said no, but whatever. Part of what became interesting in this is that several parents came up, and not only did they speak about against this policy, right? The policy kind of that has to create a problem in order to kind of say that it's responding to anything, because there was no problem. People were not having these issues beforehand. But whatever, everybody's aware, for the most part, that this is this is in order to kind of fan the flames of the culture war ahead of the November 7th election, to get everybody really juiced up to show up at the polls. That's what's going on. But in the midst of that, there was an interesting discussion, and Jenny Stevens does a great job of kind of focusing in on this in her article in the Beacon from on the 24th. In her articles, the Penridge School Board passes discriminatory sex-based sports policy and then deals with blowback from RTK court ruling. So Darren Lawson, we talked about this in the show last week, mentioned it again today. Darren Lawson, who was basically sued the school board for its book banning policies, finding that they were kind of banning books without public scrutiny. They were violating their own policies. They were removing books, and they were actually actively manipulating data that they gave back through right to know requests to make it appear that they weren't doing what they were doing. Anyways, that went to court, and Darren Lawson won that lawsuit, and now that the Penridge School Board school district has to turn over those records to basically show Darren Lawson basically what actually happened, right? And I'm sure more is going to come out of that now once those records are released. The most interesting part about the in terms of organizing around stuff is that Kevin Foster began that night, right? And he talked about what the school board is doing and how much it is costing taxpayers because of what they're doing, because there's policies that they're forcing through and so on, right? And he said, for example, tonight the board is writing another check to our high-priced Harrisburg law firm for $140,000, bringing their 2-month total to $300,000, right? And there's also a bunch of money that the school district has had to pay in right to know requests, right? Because that takes time, a lot of time. So Megan Bannis Clemens basically did this, like this, the switcheroo move, right? She said the very people, and this is of course what the Penridge GOP is running with right now. The very people she claims, right, the very people that are complaining about the school board spending all this money are the very people who were submitting all these right to know requests and are suing the school district, like, and causing the school district to have to pay all these funds, right? And it was remarkable. And I'm sitting there watching it. We did a little kind of a live peek on the school board meeting this past Monday. And I'm sitting there I'm just like, I can't believe that she basically, the only reason why that the school board has had to kind of deal with these right to know requests is because they've been denying things. Haven't been transparent, and they've been refused to answer questions, right? And they've been manipulating data, right? But all this other kinds of stuff, right? And so, but you saw Megan Bannis Clemens launch into this tirade against people who are issuing their right to know request and people who have sued the district, right? And this is where I got to say is, again, I'm always cautious, to be really clear that Joan Cullen is not a friend of public schools in many ways, but at least she's, for the most part, she's concerned about process and policy, right? And one of the things I want to see if I get the quote for her here. There's a right to know. I thought I had it highlighted. So here it is. This is kind of what it comes down to. So several members in the audience are basically saying, what are you hiding behind all this stuff in the right to know, right? What is it, blah, 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 blah. After Megan Bannis Clemens says this. Then Ron Wirtz says this, right? So if we had a modicum or just a bit of transparency, we wouldn't have to do this, Director Ron Wirtz said. If you don't communicate with the public, they have a right to know that, they have the right to know that, and they have a right to file those grievances. So I disagree with that. And then this is Joan Cullen say. He says, it's stunning to me to admonish the public for submitting right to know requests, not only because of what Ron just said, this is Cullen said, Ron just said, which is that you're not being transparent. The public really has no choice but to submit those right to know requests, Cullen pointed out. She said that she and 3 other board members, with the assistance of legal counsel, had to make multiple requests to obtain board information that they were entitled to have, including details around the Vermillion contract that they have been withheld from them. And quote, you are not forthcoming, you are not transparent, you are not being honest with the people, Collins said. Thank goodness she said that, so that was on the record, because of course this is outside of public comment, and so Megan Bannis Clemens can just frame whatever the hell she wants, whatever nonsense she wants. But that's the whole point, right? The whole point of the right, these were not just like frivolous right to know requests. The board was actively withholding information from the public and from other board members. And so the only way to get access to that information was to file these right to know requests, and in the case of the book banning policy, to sue the district. So the onus of the responsibility is on the existing board, is on the extremists that dominate that board, right? It's like saying like, oh, I don't know. I'm just trying to think of another like example of like, I just think it's like so like just so amazing. Like, it's like, okay, my house is leaking, right? There's a hole in the roof, right? And the rain is coming in my house. So I'm going to call a plumber, right? And I'm going to call the plumber, and this is a really bad analogy, but I'm going to do it anyways. I'm going to call the plumber, right, to come here, and I'm going to call the roofer to come fix everything to make sure that this is taken care of. And then I get a big bill in the mail, right? I get the big bill in the mail, and I could sit there and say like, I could say, oh man, I'm really, I'm really kind of upset that it's been raining so much, right? It's been raining so much because of freaking climate change, right? That it's kind of like causes problem in my roof and all this stuff. And then somebody comes like, well, no, the rain didn't cause it. The hole in the roof didn't cause it. You had to pay that much money because you called the plumber and you called the roofer. So it's your fault. It's like, but there was a hole in the roof, right? You don't have a choice, right? It's like this. If you're lying to the public and you are a public official, you're the cause of the problem. But oh my God, the Megan Bannis Clemens victimhood, circus is just amazing. It's amazing how you could, no matter what comes your way, you're always going to position yourself as the victim. And some vast conspiracy. God, if the left had only been that, or was only that organized, it's like, holy crap. But whatever. So there it is. Darren Lawson won his lawsuit. The other thing I wanted to point out, there was a great piece in the Bucks County Beacon that was published yesterday by Aaron Flynn J. It's something to put on people's radar because Moms for Liberty is not going away, right? Moms for Liberty didn't show up just for this school board election. They are going to continue. And so this is the piece from the Beacon, right? Aaron Flynn J. writes, the future of the Council Rock School District is at stake in this election, according to Rebecca Tillett, chair of the Together for Council Rock, the candidate steering committee. We're in danger of becoming the next battleground for the far right, who have already created such chaos in neighboring districts. We must keep Council Rock focused on education, not culture wars, said Tillett. Together for Council Rock opponents include 3 Moms for Liberty aligned candidates. Moms for Liberty members Ann Horner, Natalia Kavulia, who are both part of a private Moms for Liberty Facebook group, and Stephanie Nomos, who signed the Moms for Liberty pledge. Existing board members have already expressed interest in book bans and censorship policies, unquote, said Tillett. If they're joined by the Moms for Liberty and their allies, they will be in the same sort of political turmoil that has engulfed Central Bucks and Penridge. Right? It's always comforting to know that that your school district, the school district that you're in, has become the model of what not to do, right? So other people can point to say, we don't want to be like them. But nonetheless, here we are. So Council Rock is all going. The rest of that article kind of gets in some of the context and stuff. But the point being is that we've been focused a lot on this show. Initially was going on Central Bucks, now really even more focused on what's happened in Penridge because it's gotten that much more extreme, especially since the hiring of Vermillion. But we're seeing it spread just like we said it would, right? Just like, I've said on the show multiple times that this is what we're going to see, is that Penridge and Central Bucks are the test cases that are going to be the proof of concept so that can be exported into other school districts. And it's just going to kind of, and that's why, that Moms for Liberty convention, whatever the hell they call it, down in Philadelphia, that's the gathering point, the strategy point, right? About how to continue to do this. That's why you had what's his name? Jordan Adams from Vermillion go down there and basically lay out the playbook, right? So again, Bucks County Beacon published that audio, right? Published that and that transcript from what Adams basically went and told Moms for Liberty. It was basically the playbook of how to take over a school board and how to institute this far right Christian nationalist curriculum. Right. And so if those 3 Moms for Liberty people win in Council Rock, right, and there's already some support on the board for book bans and some of the Moms for Liberty stuff, right, Council Rock could be the second Vermillion contract. Right. These are how these people play. Right. So, kudos to the Beacon for once again kind of publishing this and recognize the kind of patterns here. This is a great article by Aaron Flynn J. Do check it out. It's called Moms for Liberty has Council Rock School District in its crosshairs. Link is in the show notes if you got it, and it's right on the Bucks County Beacon website, so do check that out. Good stuff in there. And in more proof of concept stuff, where this is what happens again. I don't want to say we told you, but we told you, right, that what was happening in the school board level is the test case, like I said, proof of concept, that was going to be pushed upwards, right? I've had arguments with people that cover the news from the kind of even left or progressive perspective, like out of Harrisburg and things like this, who have for a long time just kind of ignored what was happening in school boards because they wrongfully, in my view, viewed that what was happening in the school board was not simply just a local issue, right? And even if it was interesting in the sense that, like, oh my God, this is crazy, I thought it was kind of confined there. My argument has always been, look, the reason why that you're going to have these national organizations fund lots of money into school boards like this is, and this is what Paul Martino understood, frankly, is that not only does you take over those school boards to kind of put an agenda in there, but you also kind of bump up the numbers of voters that will turn out, right, to vote in more broad elections, right? So that if you get people really riled up at the base and they show up to vote, while they're there, they're going to also vote for the other kind of right-wing candidates. And now it seems to be the Republican Party in the Pennsylvania Senate, right, have signaled that, like, hey, everybody, where are your people up here in Harrisburg? Right. So the Republican-led Senate passed basically a bill that would take the kind of policies that we're seeing passed at Penridge and in Central Bucks and make that a statewide policy. Right. They call it explicit content legislation. Right. This was passed on a 29-21 vote, and again, this is dominated. This is called Senate Bill 7. It was dominated, the Senate is dominated by Republicans. And you even had one Democrat, Senator Lisa Boscola of Northampton County, or out of Northampton. She voted with the Republicans, right? Republicans tried to say, once again, that this is not a book ban. We want more parental control. But by now, anybody who's listening to the show, you know full well that that is code word for Christian nationalist agenda, right? That is a code word for, we want these extremist policies, right? We want to be able to ban books, right? So they can say whatever they want, but we know what it says in practice, right? State Senator Amanda Capoletti, a Democrat out of Delaware, said that SB 7, which I agree with her, is a book ban. She called it part of a, quote, stunning and increasing trend of censoring books in schools and libraries, and a, quote, direct attack on the right to read and our freedom of speech. Capoletti said the extreme vocal minority pushing book bans was missing a glaring reality. Quote, we all like to believe that every child grows up in a family that loves and values them for exactly who they are. We know that, unfortunately, is not true, unquote, she said, adding that many kids are left needing support systems and information outside their families, which they can often find in books, 100%. So something else to watch. Now, again, why I bring this to your attention, does it have, will it pass and will it become law? That is unlikely right now. Why? Well, because Democrats successfully took over this the state House of Representatives, the state legislature rather, right? So the Democrats control the lower house, right, by like one vote, I think, still, which means that it's most likely not going to pass there. But that's a very slim margin, right? There's going to be some conservative Democrats, right, that are elected there that, who knows, they might be willing to go there. And then it goes to Josh Shapiro. Will Josh Shapiro sign the legislation with kind of book bans in it? I don't think he will, right? But they're gearing up, right? They know as well that, yes, you're basically having political capital off of these school board fights, right? And then you're using to leverage it, the attempt to pass this legislation as something to run on in 2024, right? So they're already gearing up for that, and that's what's going on. But crazy, and it's here we go. So more book bans, more school board craziness, so much more kind of going on that I wish I could get to, but that's what I got. So I'm gonna call it there, folks, for today, in part because I've still got a ton of grading to do, and later on, hopefully, if I get my grading done, I'll be able to spend a little time this afternoon or this evening prepping for my D&D session tomorrow, which I'm very excited about. As I run it with my kids and my brother-in-law and stuff like this, and it's my niece, and we haven't played in a long time. I couldn't believe how long it was since we played, but I'm very, very excited do this, and we'll go there. I got some cool characters. I really have to make good on my promise to start up stuff on a Patreon thing. I'm going to be, well, I'll say this at the end. And I know I say things like this all the time on the show, and some of them I can accomplish, and some of them it's just, it takes me longer than I think it's going to be. But after the election in a couple of weeks, November 7th, make sure that you vote. After the election in a couple of weeks, I'm going to do some serious thinking about how we move forward in the most effective way here with Raging Chicken. There were some things that I don't like that I need to work out. And then I'm also really trying to think about some of the ways to be most effective in ways that are also the most sustaining for me personally, right? Because, it's no secret to any of you that this is a one-person show here. Yes, we got lots of support from our members, and thank you. Support from people who share things out, and that's kind of like, if it wasn't for all of you sharing out this content, sharing out information, sending me tips and things like this, then the show would be a shadow of what it is now. But I always imagine what we could do, right, if we had more resources, right? And you heard, when I had Cyril and Emily on from the Bucks County Beacon a couple weeks back, and talked about exactly this when it comes to trying to build out a sustainable media campaign. I mean, this is really such a critical aspect of building a democratic culture that extends beyond kind of the election cycle, right? It's something that has to be kind of ongoing and built. And so I've been thinking a lot about that from here. And, if one of the things that I would strongly recommend you do, if you, some of the things caused me to be thinking a lot about this again, is that, just had just another release. Well, I'll tell you, hold on, just give me a second. So just this past week, we had Catherine Stewart on, Bucks County Beacon. Cyril had Catherine Stewart on. We just released it on Wednesday, and this is a phenomenal interview with Catherine Stewart. A couple quotes from there. It says, what unites this Christian nationalist movement is opposition to what they see as a modern secular republic. And the movement has been becoming more and more explicitly anti-democratic as time goes on. That's what she studies. I mean, she just has some new books that come out that she studies kind of Christian nationalists and their impact. And she unpacks a little bit about the history of the kind of development of this. Fantastic interview. Do go check that out. And I have to admit, after that kind of going through and editing that interview, it left me thinking about a lot of stuff. It left me thinking about, okay, how, what actually needs to be done that I think I could contribute to. So, and that we can use this space in order to do this. So Raging Chicken is going to be doing some thinking for the next kind of couple months. So we shall see. But for now, look, like I said, thank you to all our supporters. Thank you to everybody who's made this possible. And look forward to the fight ahead. It's the weekend before Halloween. I hope everyone has a safe Halloween. Well, hopefully I'll see you on Monday too as well. Hope everyone has a safe Halloween. I'm going to do some pumpkin carving coming up. I'm excited about that. After the D&D spooky stuff. So that's great. Anyways, we're going to call it there. This is Kevin Mahoney, creator and founder of Raging Chicken. Want to remind you can help support this show, become a patron by heading over to patreon.com/rcpress. Become a patron for as little as $5 a month. Have a great weekend, everybody. Happy spooktacular weekend, if you will. I know. Anyways, see ya!